Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Cate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 68. We're going to be talking about the 2014 film A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, written and directed by Ana Lily Amirpour. You can email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org. Also, you can sign up for our newsletter at scarythoughts.org. Just go to the page, top right corner, give us your info, and we send a newsletter out with almost every episode.
Yeah, it's been a little irregular lately. I have actually now a demanding job, which I actually enjoy, so I haven't had a lot of time for outside shit lately.
And I'm just always really stressed out and put upon.
Yes.
So you recently went to the Unnamed Footage Festival. I was out of town. I wish I could have joined you. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so it was great. So there's another Bay Area horror podcast. There's quite a few, but one of the better ones is the Overlook Theater, and they spell it Theatre. So if you're looking for it online, Theatre. And they're legit, man. They're really into horror movies. Like I met all those guys over the weekend in person, and they have seen fucking everything, and I have seen nothing. And I realized that I didn't really need to get out and see more horror movies in the theater, because like Girl Walks Home Alone, like I could have been thinking about this film and comparing it to things that we've seen for years now, and I wish I had. And there's a lot of stuff like that, but they put on this film festival called Unnamed Film Footage. It's all like first person point of view, found footage horror. So, from like the view of the killer, or, the Blair Witch type of stuff, or faux documentary. And going into it, I sort of didn't really have like an expansive view of it. Like I just didn't think about it very often as its own genre. And I wasn't expecting there to be so many great films, but like I saw there's this Mexican film called Feral by Andres Kaiser, I guess. And it is one of the best movies I've seen in a long time. That is a creepy movie, totally good. One of the co-directors of the Blair Witch Project, he directed a movie called Skyman, which is kind of about alien abduction. A totally good, fun, interesting alien abduction movie. But yeah, it was really great. The opening night was here at the ATA, that television theater. It was, why the fuck is that place still open? It's
amazing.
Yeah, it's super weird. The guy who just will not book anything there as long as it's normal film.
Yeah.
I was like, man, how do you not have 40 tech dudes living in here?
Yeah.
It's just super, it's kind of impressive that it's still around. But they had this movie called The Fear Footage, which looks like it cost about $50 to make. And it is super fun. This guy was his first movie. He's not really a filmmaker, and it's really good tension and jump scares, but it's totally low budget. But there was like low budget, high budget, low concept, high concept stuff at the festival, and I'm for sure going to it next year. I missed today, unfortunately, but yeah, like I met Russell and Clark and Madeline and Oksana are all the people involved with that, and this guy Terrell too. It was just fun to talk to people other than us that are into this stuff.
Maybe we should have some or all of them on someday.
Yeah, I definitely. We both. We'd mentioned going on each other's podcasts or whatever. I thought it would be fun to do like a big recording where we just all did one episode and just ran it on each platforms if they were into that.
Maybe do live or something.
Yeah. I don't know about live. I don't want to do any live thing ever again.
Really?
Yeah. I just, our one experience I felt like I wasn't super comfortable in the live environment and really not at my best.
I feel like I really shone that day.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, you are a performer.
Thank you. I guess last thing before we start talking about the movie itself is spoilers ahead.
Yep.
So I was asking to do this movie, I think, from the very beginning of Scary Thoughts. I think, we're at episode 68, and I think I wanted this to be episode 2.
This is a very Scary Thoughts movie.
Right.
And I was very turned off to its association with Nuevo Vice, like post HBO Vice magazine. Like I like early like cocaine, denim, and hookers Vice. I don't like we're gonna save the world Vice.
Are they?
I mean, no. They scammed HBO out of a bunch of money and fucking ran off laughing to the bank, and it seems to be in decline now. But
you know more about this than I do, I guess. Well, where do you want to start with this one?
Well, I mean, what was it? I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but maybe our listeners will be interested. What was it that made you want this to be an early Scary Thoughts movie? Or not, movie.
I just really like this movie, and I just sort of felt that it deserved I don't want to say deserved attention as if us talking about it is somehow going to help the filmmaker out.
Yeah, she might have gotten somebody bigger than Jason Momoa in her next movie.
Exactly. But I saw this movie in the theater and was really taken by it. And I think there's a lot there, a lot to talk about. But also not many people have seen it. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it would be interesting to examine, given that there's not a lot of dialogue out there. I mean, it definitely made a splash, when it first came out, especially among people who are very serious about film. But that didn't necessarily translate into her directing, I don't know, episodes of Law and Order or something. I don't know.
Yeah. She did do an episode of that.
Well, she did an episode of Legion, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, people love that. I mean, comic book people love that show.
That show is fantastic.
I'm all in on the X-Men, especially the new House of X Powers of 10 series. And so maybe I'll have to go give it another shot. And I also love Aubrey Plaza, so I'm going to have to watch the whole series.
I think it's her best thing.
I really was completely turned off by the utter whackness of their fight choreography. It may be the worst I've seen in like something like that in a long time. But
never thought of that.
Yeah,
something I loved about this movie is, I mean, I tend to be drawn to pretty minimal music and film and writing and aesthetics. And this movie is obviously very minimal, but it's not empty. Like, it's a very tight script. It articulates a very small world, its own world. And there's not merely just a few characters. They're all very creatively woven together.
Yep.
Like the cat follows this person, and that's how he knows she killed his dad. And the jewelry goes from one person to another. The car gets scratched even though she's scratching the wrong person's car, even though it's the same car. Like, it's like this small town drama where not necessarily everyone knows each other, but everybody's connected.
It's also very noir. Like, this film is extremely influenced by Sin City.
Oh, absolutely.
The films, yeah, and the director mentions that, and like those elements where you have these characters, these really boldly drawn characters. I love like everybody wears the same outfit basically in each scene, which is a very noir-y kind of thing to do, and I just love.
Yeah, I also really appreciate that the ways in which they are all interconnected are through these economies of money and drugs and sex and violence and love. And that's sort of how they all weave together. Like, these two have violence as a connection, and these two have money as a connection, and it's all sort of spun into a circle.
Yeah.
But it does follow a traditional narrative arc where the two lovers break out of the circle and are sort of stuck with a sort of hanging question mark at the end and a cat.
Yeah. All that, all those like elements that you just talked about made me really nostalgic for like my early 20s, and I'm not often thinking about like the old days. I'm just kind of not.
Well, that's when you were at your best.
Yeah, you really are. I mean,
no, just you.
I mean, no, just people in general. I think the olds get out of here. But yeah, like I was going to sleep listening to the soundtrack, and it made me think about just being young and wild in nowhere towns and things like that, and it just nails it.
Yeah. Speaking of the soundtrack, the soundtrack is fucking great. This is another movie, and we've hit a couple of these that are like the cinematography and music, both the compositions, the sort of spaghetti western Morricone-esque soundtrack, and the Farsi pop and classic music weave this really beautiful world together. It's also cool, I feel like, because of things like Spotify, getting introduced to new music is a very, I think it's really easy to just fall into your algorithms and your own choices, and exploring is not what it used to be. And when I worked in a record store, especially, and there were no algorithms out there to determine things, I would go seeking out anomalous music. And this soundtrack is the exact type of thing that I would be seeking out. When I was in India, I was like looking through record shops trying to find weird shit, and it was very hard, but it was very satisfying to find those cassettes and I dragged vinyl. I had one backpack in India and I bought vinyl,
Yeah. I definitely feel you with like, there's something to like the tactility of doing it with records and tapes and things like that. But I use Spotify as an exploration tool all the time. I think in the last year of getting Spotify without the commercials, I've discovered more music that's weird that I love than I have probably in the previous 10 years. I mean, it's been amazing for me.
You might be searching with more dexterity than I suppose.
I'm actively searching. I don't rely on things to be fed. So I'll sometimes what I will do is
But how would you search for, would you sit down randomly and enter like Iranian pop music 70s or something like that, that's,
no.
And an algorithm would never bring that to you. But I feel like if you're in a record store, that's the type of thing you would walk into a record store and someone would be playing and you'd be like, well, what the fuck's going on? And you get into a conversation.
See, though, that's also an algorithm kind of like, because you're dealing with the
but there's
brain
more
of the
randomization.
record nerve. Not necessarily. It depends on how you approach it. Like I'm my own algorithm, so a lot of times when I'm discovering music like this now, it's often from a film. I'm like, what is that fucking weird thing? And I'll go look it up. And then all of a sudden I'm like reading about like psychedelic bedouin guitar music for like an hour.
Yeah.
And then there's certain people who I often will look up like this woman. I was like, top 10 favorite songs. It's like a thing I'll do is I'll look for artists that I really respect from one genre and I want to see what they listen to, whether it be like illustrators or whatever. So that's basically how I approach finding music now.
Yeah. That's cool. What else?
Like similar to the Joker, like where the score came first, the music came first. Well, she had the idea of the girl wearing the chador. Chador. How do you say it?
It sounds to me like you hit each syllable with the same amount of stress.
Yeah, I can't pronounce it.
Chador.
I just can't do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I love that. There's all this idea. I saw some commentary where they're like, oh, it's a woman taking back the night and all this stuff. It's like, she put on this thing, felt like she was like a vampire superhero and then wanted to go on a skateboard. And that was the genesis of this movie, which I think is just cool. Like this cool feeling and then this cool soundtrack came together to make
you're saying the filmmaker did that.
The filmmaker.
You should be clear
that
the filmmaker.
Also the vampire, but the filmmaker also in real life.
The most memorable thing about this movie is actually the thing that the filmmaker thought of first, which is this idea of a young vampire in a chadar on a skateboard.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Yeah. The settings in this movie are incredible too. Like it's like Taft, California, I guess, which is, but the oil rigs really gave it like a near dark vibe.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. And what I love is like you could be a fucking dork and be like, they're extracting the blood of Mother Earth like a vampire does.
Sure.
But
it's right there.
But neither of those filmmakers, both female directors, which is kind of awesome, with like kind of Marlboro Man-y leading characters that are sort of hapless. It's like Near Dark and this have like a lot of, there's a lot of connections, except for you get the feeling like, well, I was going to say this vampire is sort of more like pretentious in her taste, but I mean, she's just got a room full of pop culture shit and records.
She's got a Madonna poster and a Bee Gees poster. It's not too pretentious.
Did you know that the Madonna poster is not
Margaret Atwood?
It's Margaret Atwood. Like this movie, I fucking love the director so much. There's so much stuff like this in the movie that is totally to my taste.
Yeah.
I can't believe I didn't watch this movie for as long as I did. And then, I don't know what it was. I don't know why I wasn't into this. And I watched probably about 4 hours of interviews with her. I am so all in.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a bit of a story with her in interviews, and that's that I, of course, was in love with this movie, and then her next movie was coming out called The Bad Batch a couple of years ago. And so I went to the Alamo Draft House where she was going to be present to it. Amirpour was going to be there and do a Q&A or whatever. And so we're all there. And she and the presenter, who I think is the guy who does Terror Tuesdays, I don't know, one of the Alamo Draft House guys,
Fellow
get up
dorks.
there. Yeah. Gets up there and they're both piss drunk, but she's like brownout drunk. Like she's barely standing.
Is it brownout because she's Iranian?
Wow.
Check yourself. You're an American now. You're held to a higher standard.
God. And so they stumble off stage. They show the movie. The movie is, in my estimation, not good at all.
We'll have to talk about that later.
We'll talk about The Bad Batch
I love
later.
it.
And So, the credits roll, everybody stays seated, everybody applauds. Silence. Waiting. And everybody realizes that she's not coming back and gets up and leaves. She was just too fucking hammered to do a Q&A. Mm-hmm. And also nobody at Alamo had the sense to come and tell everybody, hey, that thing you paid for, it's not happening. Sorry.
Respect.
It's such bullshit. It just kind of soured me to her, honestly, is like, fucking keep your shit together, lady.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because, like, Bukowski would do shit like that all the time. And it was just part of his thing.
Yeah, but fuck that guy.
Please.
Fuck that guy.
You're American now, Mark.
He's gross.
Okay. Well, okay. So I don't want to get us too far off of the actual movie that we're covering, but
we barely said anything
that we
about
haven't
yet.
said too much about. But I do want to like maybe talk about The Bad Batch for a minute and then just table it for the rest of the episode.
Yes. So for our listeners, we're softy spoilers for The Bad Batch. It was their follow-up movie starring Jason Momoa and what is her name? It's like Lily Fairweather or something like that.
Suki
Stackhouse.
I know, that's exactly what I thought it was. Oh, Suki Waterhouse. Actually, very close to Suki.
Very close.
Yeah. And Keanu Reeves is in it.
Yeah. And it's like a post-apocalyptic. I'm going to say the most dismissive thing about it, and I don't need to say more, but I get the feeling Amirpour took acid while she was at Burning Man and thought, like, I'm going to make a cannibal movie, and then didn't really take it much further than that. Yeah, so this movie is heavily influenced by her own words and by anyone who is looking at it. Jodorowsky's film El Topo. Sure.
Yeah, so it's totally El Topo. If you're being not so generous to it, I think your read is accurate. There are, like, Burning Man elements of it that seem pretty shitty. But there's also... she considers herself a really personal filmmaker, so things she's going through just show up on the screen. So she talks about she was going through a breakup at the time, and you like really literally feel like you're missing parts of yourself. So she had this vision of herself, or a girl, she doesn't say herself, but a girl in the desert missing an arm and a leg. And then she's like, okay, well, what sort of world does this character live in? And then she creates the world around it. I really liked it. And I also think... yeah, I know she's super into the Jodorowsky because in one interview she has that Jodorowsky Judas Priest t-shirt on and she talks about El Topo being her favorite Western. But Jodorowsky wrote a Western comic book about a gunslinger with one arm, and it is called Bouncer. And I just immediately thought that was kind of like what was going on with this. And I liked Jason Momoa's character quite a bit. This like really terrible cannibal that has this sort of soft artistic side. I thought it was just pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then the Jim Carrey character, like and she also went about getting people for this movie in a very Jodorowsky way. Like, for example, she got to go meet Jim Carrey and she shows up to his house with pillowcases and the eyes are cut out and they have like smiles on them. And she's like, you wear one and I'll wear one for a little bit. And that's how they start talking. And it just totally reminds me of like how Jodorowsky tried to get Salvador Dali to be part of Dune. And he went on these weird, stupid little spirit quests. I find the whole thing completely endearing and
that's good.
Tickles the part of my brain that's reinterested in the occult. Yeah.
Right on. I think earlier we were talking about Near Dark and Sin City. I think that something that I really did appreciate about this movie is it has all these touchstones like spaghetti westerns, like Jim Jarmusch, like James Dean, Let the Right One In, Eraserhead, but there's no fan servicing.
None at all.
There's no like, I mean, like we mentioned the Margaret Atwood Madonna poster. That's kind of it.
Freakishly deep cut. Like, and it's not forward in it at all.
No.
And I didn't know it until I saw the poster.
And it's also not even a reference that makes sense in this world. So it's not, even that's not fan servicey.
Yeah.
You can't go like, oh, well, it's kind of pointing out this thing that's going on in this world.
Yeah.
It's not. It's totally anomalous. So it's kind of fine.
Yeah. It's more how Tarantino makes movies, where it's like he's heavily influenced by all these elements and he's for sure like stealing and repurposing all this stuff, but he's not like having a Millennium Falcon fly across the screen in reference to Poltergeist and Star Wars at the same time, like in Stranger Things. It's not as forward, and it's just tasteful. Like that's a better word for it. It's interesting you mentioned Jim Jarmusch in that because she's not a Jarmusch fan.
I think she is lying.
I don't think that's true. Because here's the thing. When she said, I just don't like these films very much, I thought initially I was not initially much of a fan of Jim Jarmusch. Like, I just thought his movies are kind of boring, and it took me a long time to go back and kind of appreciate that. And it really wasn't until I saw Patterson, which is a pretty recent movie, that I went back and watched his old movies and really appreciated the nothing happening. It was just something that I never really got into. And then somebody asks her in an interview, well, you know, this movie is very Jim Jarmusch. And she's like, oh, I get it. It's black and white, in a really dismissive way. It was like totally cunty. And I was like, oh, that's a perfect answer for that.
It is, but at the same time, it's not just that it's black and white.
It's the music. It's the contrast.
It's the pacing. It's the minimal dialogue. It's the interrelationships of a very small cast. It is everything. It is the cool, like, which I think we can't dismiss, is a thing that both Jim Jarmusch and Amirpour both have, is cool in the most classic 50s post-bebop sense.
Yeah.
Both films traffic in that as an aesthetic element heavily.
Yeah.
And so for her to be, she doesn't have to like Jim Jarmusch, but to sort of play it off as if like that's a reductive thing. I mean, I think, I would imagine if I was her, I'd be sick of the reference because it's the most obvious one, but it is the truest one. This movie is so much like Stranger Than Paradise and Down by Law.
I think it's more like Robert Rodriguez. I think it's more El Mariachi than it is those movies.
I have not seen El Mariachi.
So sad. Do you know
that's a gunslinger movie, right?
Yeah, it's like, so Desperado is the sort of remade semi-sequel to it.
I love Desperado.
Right, Desperado is fucking great. Like, in a way, it's like El Mariachi was one of the films that just broke open this sort of small-scale filmmaking. Yeah. Robert Rodriguez wrote a book called Rebel Without a Crew, which is fucking phenomenal. It's like kind of a manifesto for the small filmmaker, and it was kind of a bigger deal at its time because he was sort of one of the first guys to be like, look, if you can only make your movie with video, make it with video, which was like kind of like a groundbreaking idea at the time, really.
Yeah.
But he had little stuff in the book that's really interesting. He was like, use what you have. You know, it's kind of like that scene in Princess Bride where they're like, why didn't you tell me we had a wheelbarrow? Like, and then the whole like scheme centers around this thing they have. But there's a really long, slow shot of a tortoise crossing the road. And he said that people always ask him about that shot. And they're like, well, what does it mean? He's like, it means I had a tortoise and there was a road and I needed a transition shot. And there's a similar scene, like that really gorgeous scene with the train.
Yeah.
That comes up. I was like, man, how did they even do that? And like, how expensive must it have been to do that? No. Completely fucking random.
You wait around long enough and there's a train.
Yeah. I mean, they weren't even planning that. Like they had shot it. They had set up the shot. And the first take, the train came up and they were like, just keep it rolling. Just keep it rolling. And it happened. And it was like, I think it's the most attractive shot in the whole film.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Maybe we need to talk about feminism.
Do we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it usually gets you pretty mad, which is always the best part of this podcast.
So I think that like people would get the wrong opinion on my approach to it, which is that I'm not against feminism. I'm against self-identified feminists, especially of the male variety. Like it's like who doesn't like the idea of strong women who are powerful, take care of their own shit, are cool, know how to do things, are capable. Totally in all that stuff. Like the Ron Swanson scene in Parks and Rec is basically my feminism, where he's like, you know, I'm not an anythingist, but my life has been shaped by strong and powerful women. Like, it's fine. But it's like almost people have this like weird ideological axe. They always want to grind it on shit. Like, for example, with the new movie, A Bad Batch, there's this video going around of her getting like owned by somebody in the audience. And this girl stands up and says, well, I feel really weird about how you had a white woman kill a black mother. And she's like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, what's your answer for me? She's like, I don't have an answer for me. You brought that to this film. And the reality is like the black mother, that's not her primary characteristic. Her primary characteristic is she's a cannibal who ate that woman's arm. So like, of course you're going to kill her, right? And it feels like the feminist stuff was applied in that way to this movie. Like other people brought it to this because she talks about how I'm just an individual person who makes movies about individuals against systems. So I don't think she's bringing feminism to this at all.
No, but a lot of people did for sure. I think it for me, it just brings up questions of being a feminist and a filmmaker, being a feminist filmmaker, being a shitty feminist and being a filmmaker, being a feminist and being a shitty filmmaker, and then being a woman and being a filmmaker who people retroactively decide you have made something that is feminist because, you know, and there are many kinds of feminisms as there are women who identify as feminists. So to apply that, that badge and that surrounding rhetoric around a work that was made by a woman or made by a man for that matter is always odd.
Yeah. A lot of time, I think those distinctions are super, super interesting because it's like, is it not possible to have just been a female director who is just a director? Like, to me, like, I don't think of her or the woman that did Raw or even the Catherine Bigelow. I just think of them as credible directors. And I feel like my perspective on that is where people want the whole thing to end up, right? Like, where you're just a filmmaker, you know? Like, I'm totally on board with calling all actresses actors. Like, you're just an actor. Like, I like that shit doesn't seem controversial to me at all. But what is annoying to me is like a movie like Avengers Endgame where you're like, there's a scene and there's like the 5 female superheroes lined up and like, we got this, girls. You're like, it's just so in your face and corny. Like, I think if I was like a hardcore feminist, I would be annoyed by the corniness of it. And it feels like it devalues the whole thing kind of, you know, it just seems corny to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's representation or whatever, but like, just go look at this fucking badass female director's films and support her when they come out, you know?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that about the books I read. Like, I'm all in on Michelle T, right? Clearly a feminist author, but it's not, I don't think she throws that out in front in her books too much, like as a title. Maybe she does. I mean, I guess she does. Yeah, it's kind of her thing.
I'd say I guess you are into a lot of feminist art, actually.
I fucking love it. Like, I like women. I like the female perspective on things. You know, I just don't feel like, have you seen the hashtag male feminists of Instagram?
Oh, dear, no.
It's exactly why I would never identify that way. Like, it's exactly what you think it is. It's these sad fucking dudes who are sort of like, pretending. They're not even pretending. It's just like, I'll let women tell me what to think about feminism. It's like, dude, you can have a perspective. No woman who is gonna want to fuck you is gonna want you to be wishy-washy like that about shit.
I don't know about that.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. I'm not out there.
There's kinds for all kinds, Chad.
It's true.
Well, let's talk about representation anyway. There's one thing that gave me pause. Maybe that's the wrong phrase to use it, but I was confused by the character Rockabilly, the drag queen or trans character, because she's definitely really interesting and really arresting and very memorable. And her dance with the balloon is like gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a beautiful
mesmerizing
dance scene. Yeah.
But her role in the film is silent and objectified, and I am in no way calling this problematic. I'm more saying that, is she being used as window dressing?
Do you, I have to assume you know this, but maybe our audience does it, but do you know how like trans issues are treated in Iran? Like, if you're gay, you can't be gay, but you can get a state-sponsored transition to being a woman.
I did not know this.
Yeah, it's fucking bonkers. Iran is super fucked up. So if you're gay, they want to execute you and throw you off the top of a building. But your option is to be, I'm a woman now. So you might just be a regular-ass gay dude, but you don't want to get stoned to death, so you transition, right? And then those people are thoroughly objectified and sort of fetishized in a lot of the ways that they are in America, but they're almost like pushed away. And so I thought, like, from the very little I know about that it was like kind of saying something about that. Like,
that's interesting.
Yeah, like, here, see this person. It's like, you're like, are we just all supposed to pretend? Like, in their perspective is like, this person is definitely a female brain in this body, and that's why they were acting gay.
Right.
It's just a really weird way to get to that, you know?
Holy shit.
Yeah. I'm surprised you hadn't heard of that. I mean, I don't mean in a like fact-shaming way, like you fucking know. It's just, it's
I'm surprised I didn't know that.
It's so really bananas. Yeah.
I mean, that character definitely has like dignity, no question. But she is literally marginalized in this ensemble cast as this sort of like silent window dressing. And it also just sort of brings up this question of, in the history of cinema and the history of Hollywood, how representation works. You go from a backdrop to a position of servitude to a minor role. And, like it's this long creep into the frame. I'm super obsessed with some arcs in the podcast, You Must Remember This, which I very highly recommend, especially her Manson episodes. But she recently did an arc about, so good. She recently has done this, I think, 6 episodes about Song of the South, the Disney movie. And she does one whole episode about Hattie McDaniel, which, she played the mammy and the servant for most of her career. And it was the way she fed her kids. And, time kind of passed her by and she was still sort of doing this as a way to keep her job. But, she was a trailblazer.
Is she the one who has that awesome quote? She's like, I would rather get paid a fortune to pretend to be a nanny than get paid nothing to be a nanny.
Something like that. Yeah, that's her.
I'm misquoting it, but
no, it's super close
like,
to that. Yeah. But she's an example of someone who, okay, you're a black woman. Black women can only play background, marginally sassy servants in Hollywood. And I don't know that it's that much better at this point. Like, there are plenty of instances where it's much better, no question. But as far as mainstream movies, black women still tend to be in the background, be the sassy best friend, whatever. Where am I going with this?
Yeah.
Oh, just like the drag queen, the trans character, the character who is not, let's say, gender conforming in some way. This just sort of seemed like an example of that. Like, okay, well, at least there's a gender non-conforming character in this movie, but she is not speaking and she's kind of window dressing and kind of adds a layer of exoticism to this movie, which, again, to be fair, all these characters are very strange. All these characters are very exotic and unique and bizarre. So I'm not pitting anyone against anyone else or anything.
Yeah. The way that this film was put together, you have to wonder, she probably just knows that person as part of the weird, Iranian art scene that she was running in when she put this movie together.
Possibly, yeah.
Because everything in this movie is extremely constructed. That's one of the things that's cool about all the signs are handmade. The money is made by some Iranian street artist that she ran into.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, anything you're looking at is pretty much constructed.
Yeah.
And the soundtrack, she went to a Brian Jonestown Massacre show, and then the guitar player was like, "What do you do?" And she's like, "I'm making a vampire western, and it's in Iran." And he's like, "Oh, funny, I make this spaghetti western music," and boom, there's the score.
Yep.
It's a very synchromystical way of doing art, which I am fucking obsessed with right now. Very in my continuing ear beatings about Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, I'll give to anyone around me. This filmmaker has sort of entered that pantheon a little bit for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, just the world building, because it's shot in California and every sign is in Farsi, it contributes to the otherworldliness of it. It is very slow. The music is very atmospheric. There are these long silent takes with minimal music.
Yeah.
But in addition to that, it exists in a non-place. This bad city is this non-space, which is kind of, most of my favorite movies tend to exist in this, I don't know where this is space.
Well, even big, huge mainstream examples of it, like Gotham City, is a place that doesn't exist, and it's its own thing. And I think that if I were to make films, or even as I think about writing more and more, I want to create sets like that. I don't want to write about San Francisco or Oakland or New Orleans. I want to write something that it takes place out of time. It's almost like like Shakespeare's The Tempest. It's so interesting because it's it's extracted from the world, and this movie has that kind of feel to it. At the very end when they're driving off, I don't get the feeling that they drive off into anything.
No, I mean the sun's going to come up and she's in a car.
Yeah.
There's trouble ahead.
Yeah, that 57 Thunderbird's hot. It belongs to her dad. Like
So
another
good.
like part of like the whole thing like mixing through. But the character's also, 187 years old. And so you got to feel that she's been around the block at least a few times. Like she's probably, ran off in a carriage in the 1920s or something like that at some point.
Yeah.
That whole backstory thing too. You had mentioned that you thought it was kind of pretentious.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I really don't want to badmouth Amirpour too much because I fucking love this movie so much. I think she's really interesting and I'm really excited to see what's next, despite the fact that I really hated The Bad Batch. But you were mentioning that you thought she was a great interviewee, and I kind of, well, in addition to her being a terrible Q&A person for being too drunk to show up, I find her to be just kind of pretentious. And watching interviews with her, I sort of feel like, oh, she's totally like one of our friends, part of our circles, but I wouldn't necessarily invite her over for dinner too often because she's just a little annoying.
I would have her over all the time.
Yeah, right. But no, she was talking about having backstories for every one of her characters, which if you're a good screenplay writer, of course you do. But she was sort of talking about it as if it was like this amazing thing that she invented. Like it was very, very self-serious and pretentious. And I was kind of like, Jesus Christ, like you're just doing your job. Like,
yeah, talking about it, like when you build up this entire world that no one ever sees except for you, is, of course, tons of people do it, right? Like, I mean,
that's what you do. And when you don't, you do so at your peril.
But I have a feeling with screenplays, a lot of people don't, like, or they don't go super far. Like, and this is an idea I associate with Quentin Tarantino, where he talks about how, the bride in Kill Bill, like Beatrix Kiddo, there's like all this lore about her and the Hattori Hanzo swords. Like when the Hattori Hanzo sword is pulled out of its sheath all the way, it has to touch blood. Otherwise, it will break the next time it's used or something like that. There's some story around it. And I think that it's something I used to do when I would like write role-playing game modules, like when I play D&D or Vampire the Masquerade or something like that. I would have like notebooks full of the backstories of these worlds.
What if they walk off the path?
Yeah. Well, you're creative. So come up with something else, you're not done. Yeah. Or you just repurpose it and move it back to the front. You just re-edit it on the spot. I kind of want to get back into playing D&D. Not D&D, but there's a game called Tales of the Loop that is out now. It's like this like weird retro 80s, but it's like machines that are like almost Robotech.
It sounds steampunk to me.
It's not
I would advise
steampunky.
Against.
Well, it's going to be a show on Amazon coming up, but it has this very, I don't know. Yeah, you have to check it out. Like, I'll put a link maybe in our newsletter.
Okay.
I love it.
Going back to speaking about world building is definitely something that sci-fi in general has in its favor, and just alternative fantasy and horror often has, as they so often create these worlds that are outside of our own. I think that is one of the strongest things about like the Southern Reach trilogy, the books, and then the movie Annihilation. I doubt there will be a follow-up to Annihilation that didn't do too well. Is that it exists in this somewhere? It's Earth, but it's not this Earth. Or a movie like Stalker that just sort of exists in its own little world. Oh, I had a question. I was very confused by the use of heroin in this movie. I've never shot anything up. I've seen lots of footage of it done and being acted done. So faked and real.
Have you never seen somebody shoot up in person?
Never.
Okay.
So the first time we see it, or maybe it's the second time, he like wraps belts around Adi's wrists. And at first I'm like, oh, he's going to force her to shoot up by tying off her arm, but he's actually just binding her wrists to keep her still. And then he just kind of pushes the needle randomly into possibly a vein. Yeah. But he didn't tie her off and there was no blood. Yeah. And that seemed weird. And then he shoots himself up without tying himself off either. He also has no track marks anywhere. For a junkie, you got to be pretty committed to disguising, but he didn't seem like the type of person who would be at great pains to hide his habit. Yeah. The addiction aspect seemed a little odd.
Yeah, so the mechanics of shooting heroin here. Yes. So you can just skin pop, which means you're just injecting it intramuscularly, like just sticking the needle in your leg. And a lot of people, like a pretty common path is snorting to skin popping to veins. And the idea is like and those are increased levels of power, you know, as you use them. Like, so snorting it isn't as strong as shooting it to your like leg. And then a lot of people will do the skin popping because they don't want track marks. Like because part of what's happening with track marks is the tracks are going off, you know, like the veins are collapsing and they're abscessing and things like that. And as far as not having track marks, I mean, I don't know, like we don't know how long he's been shooting up. You know, he's been living with this kid and all of a sudden it seems to be a problem. So maybe it's like escalated very quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. But when I was my first run at college when I was 17, I was trying to be a film major at the school that didn't really have a film department, University of New Orleans. And I went with this girl to do like what was like a really edgy thing to film. And her roommate was all hooked on speed and he was shooting it. So we did like this, we like filmed him shooting up and it looked a lot like it does in this movie. So having filmed someone shooting up, not in the vein, I guess it's pretty legit the way it looks.
All right.
But she has this weird, like the kind of psychonaut thing where it's like there's these distinctions where some drugs are good and some drugs are bad. And, you know, cocaine and heroin, bad. LSD, ecstasy, good. But weed is like nowhere in this movie, which I think is kind of weird. But she does have another movie where there's a character smoking pot, but she doesn't really talk about pot in interviews. Like I was like, oh, she's got to be a stoner, right? And I couldn't hear her talk about it at all.
Yeah, because she talks quite liberally about psychedelics.
Yeah. Well, it's the hip thing to do these days.
That's true.
Yeah.
I love that dealer so much.
Yeah. I wanted to start talking about the characters individually, and I think he's a great place to start.
Yeah. So, as you were pointing out, he's based on, what's his name?
Ninja from Deantwood.
So which, of course, when I first saw this movie, I was like, oh my God, what an amazing reference point.
I mean, the same haircut,
straight up,
same mustache. He's the same. You know, instead of having pretty Y's on his neck, it says sex, which is pretty on the nose. And then his Farsi tattoo on the side of his head says pimp, which is like, boom, the pimp has pimp written on him.
There it is.
Yeah.
Well, but I also like that, I mean, he's the most despicable character in this movie, but he's given space to be himself. Like his sexy dance is pretty hot. He gets to have his moment of seduction that's like, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a really way more developed and complex character than it should be, which I think is totally her jam. You know, like for example, there's the scene where he has his prostitute in the car and his job is that he's a pimp, right? Her job is that she's a whore. And he's kind of just basically giving her the sort of life advice that like a boss would, like, hey, you're 30. What are you doing? And because when he was saying that, it wasn't just like, oh, you fucking whore, I hate you. It was like very much like the kind of shit I've heard from fucking bosses before. I was like, oh, this is a workplace conversation. It just happens to involve a blowjob and a Thunderbird. You know, it's like, and that almost makes it worse a little bit because it's like work.
No, it does make it worse.
Yeah, it makes it way worse. And so you set up that character for being really despicable, but then there's this. You start thinking about like, oh, this guy, like there's probably not a whole lot of routes to success in Bad City. And I was thinking about the background of him. He's gone for it, you know? And then his apartment looks like Joe Rogan's studio. There's like taxidermy everywhere. There's a giant pot painting on the wall. There's candles. And then that made me think,
there's just weights for you to just,
there's just weights.
You just do a line and start curling.
Yeah, it's for sure is Joe Rogan's studio. And then he invites her to have a good time. You know what I mean? It's like, hey, come back to my place and let's do drugs and party.
Yeah.
Who knows how bad it would go. It definitely goes bad for him.
Yeah.
We talked about the father a little bit. I mean, the father is an interesting character because he's like a bad person. Like he's an actual bad person.
Well, he's a failure.
Yeah.
He clearly had his heart broken by his wife somehow that he's still angry about.
Yeah.
Great scene of him yelling about how his wife's eyes are in the cat's eyes.
Yes.
That was great.
Yeah. And you're like, what is going on? And then the cat like looks around really well. It's like a good animal actor.
That
you're like,
cat is a fucking star.
Yeah. The cat is really interesting. And I felt like there were like maybe some like soft references to cat people a little bit with that whole thing. Like the woman becoming a cat. I wouldn't put it past her.
Yeah.
You know, I liked his like freak out. You know, when he's like breaking the photos for everybody, he's like having this weird freak out. Like, have you ever been around anybody who's been on drugs and freaked out like that?
and broken shit like that, no.
It's both terrifying and annoying. Like and I think that hit that chord like really well. And he like kind of gives him the money, and he like makes a clean break from his father. It's like, it's weird. It's like he's realized his father's like hitting bottom, and he's like basically like, get out of here. You're not with me anymore. Which I don't know how I feel about him just sort of accepting that she killed his father. It seems like that would be hard.
Very, but it's interestingly tied to his father saying, "You'd be better off without me." Mm-hmm. He might have even said, I should kill myself. You'd be better off without me." I forget. There's something about him volunteering that his removal from the situation would be best for everyone, and that is what she does for Arash. You know?
She's like his white knight. She like solves all his problems.
Pretty much. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else. I was thinking about her, and like then there's the little kid. How great of a vampire language is Farsi, man. Like when she's threatening the little kid, it sounds awesome. I don't want to ever hear a vampire speak in any other language. And like the little echo effect on it, like she sounds so fucking scary and cool.
Yeah. It's interesting that her violence in this film is upon men and not the little boy, but the little boy gets a warning.
Yeah, you had better beautiful. Be good.
Yeah, I'll be watching you.
Yeah.
It's fucked up. Something I also appreciate about the way that this sits in the history of vampire cinema, which is something I used to be really, really obsessed with. You know, vampires are really mostly a Western thing. I mean, they're through many, many cultures, and there are variations on the dead eating the living.
Yeah, the pretentious cool vampire is for sure Western.
Right. But I feel like this Iranian, in quotes, vampire movie is so beautifully American in the way that it is it's this multicultural film in a sense, but not like Graceland, Paul Simon Graceland multicultural. Mm-hmm. It's more like, this is what America is. This is what America can make happen. Is a film that could never be made in its home country is made here in a sort of intermediary space with pop culture and these references to like James Dean in the car and the open road representing freedom. And it's a spaghetti Western, which is a hybridized film genre and things like that. Like it's just such this hodgepodge of things that is so much about what this country at its best can do with all of its diversity.
Yeah. And she says that is like, I think her description of what the film is almost exactly that. And she says like, look, I'm this like girl who showed up in America with a British accent, was brown, and learned how to be American watching 80s films, and then loves it. Like she's not like sitting there trying to deconstruct these films and understand how power works in them and all this shit. She just like straight up says, I love Robert Zemeckis as a director.
Yes.
You know, and then her top 10 films that she picked out, they're the hits. You know what I mean? There's no female directors in that list. It's, you know, Kubrick and Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez. It's like the people that when I'm being lazy and not trying to like expand into like cooler female territory, like there's just the things I like. It's like the films that a person who got really into movies in the 90s would be into.
Yeah.
You know, but because she is this Iranian woman immigrant, she's reflecting it through a prism that becomes interesting. And she's not doing a cover. Like she's not trying to be an Elvis impersonator. She's becoming the Cramps, you know?
Yes.
And it's
that's
like,
great.
There's just something cool about that. It's cooler.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting what you were saying about her top 10 being, I mean, this is going back to the feminism question, which is always kind of difficult to scamper around the periphery of. But should she have women on her top 10 list? What does that even mean?
Well, if it's not in her list, then it shouldn't be in her.
No, totally.
You know what I mean?
Of
like
course.
If she can't point to female filmmakers that she's inspired by, then like, I mean, should she lie? You know,
no, that's an interesting question. Does it make her not a feminist if she doesn't name check women filmmakers in her top 10 list? What does it mean if I was to make a list and there was no women on it? What if I quickly made a list and then said, oh shit, there are no women on that list. Oh, I've got to include these people. Like, what is that saying?
It's like the Oscars question, right? Like this year, they're like, oh, we need to celebrate all these female directors. You mean like the director of fucking Hustlers? I mean, give me a fucking break, dude. Like that movie's trash. Like it's just not at the level. And that's not to say that there aren't, like if women, like I would have given this movie a fucking Oscar. You know what I mean? Like there are so many super cool female directors out there, but like people only want to affirm the mediocre mainstream because they're only affirming mediocre mainstream films, right? Like, so like if you go down below a little bit, there's like a gang of interesting women. And that was like one of the things I'm not on board with Harold Bloom when he talks about like, well, the reason why I don't really think too much of like female writers is there's just not that many good ones. And what, he says it in a weird kind of way. And then he's like, and also I'm very annoyed by the female writers that people do canonize. They're just not very good. And here's the ones I like. And it's like, I guess, but like, have you read, like, I never saw him mention Anna's Nin. I love her, It's interesting. I can do the whole top 10 list women with authors super easy, like including women, but I can't do it with films as much. And I think that's more Hollywood's fault because they don't give fucking female filmmakers money.
That's totally true.
She even talks about how this filmmaker, she talks about how when she was at UCLA, she went to the group and was like, hey, I want money to make this film. And they're like, nope. And she's like, okay, go fuck yourself. And later on, when she made the film and she was popular, they have her on their website, as an example of a success. I would be like, take my fucking name off your website. Take it out of your mouth right now, you fucks.
Yeah. I mean, I know a couple of women who've been through the Hollywood system, and it's funny to watch young men make shitty movies and then be given carte blanche to do their second feature film, and then
crazy.
Watch women like make a great first film and then struggle for 8 years to get the second one done. It's real.
Yeah, and this is where like
not unilaterally, and there are plenty of men struggling who can't get their second feature going, no question.
Yeah.
But it is unquestionable.
Yeah, it's for sure
how it happens to women.
And this is where like when I do back off of my like, feminism, it's a dumb thing. I was like, this shit's real, man. Like they're super talented female filmmakers that are even genre filmmakers who maybe like, aren't as talented, but they're talented within the genre. Like there's a fuckload of female horror filmmakers who are making at least okay movies, like the Soxa sisters or whatever their names are. Like they made some fun horror movies, but they're not on any mainstream list. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
What do you think? I was going to say, what do you think changes that? But it's like the type of people that people think are actual fucking creeps run Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? The Harvey Weinstein thing is a perfect example, right? And it's weird. Like, I'm just like basically a former bartender that works in marketing, and people would be like, oh, it fucking meant to like me. I'm like, hey, look, dude, I'm not the problem. I've never even worked in a toxic office environment, But the people who run Hollywood, who are always like preaching at people, like, like the people in the Academy, like they're like, we need to change this. You're literally the Academy. You could change this. It was like when it's like when Michelle Obama was talking about like, we need to bring our girls home, like that whole Boko Haram thing. And Chappelle had the funny bit. It was like, you're sitting across the table from the person who could bring those girls home,
Right.
But like, I would love to see the fucking Hollywood system come down completely.
Oh, sure.
But it's like, it's weird. Like we have all this democratizing equipment. We could go outside right now and make a movie that was probably looks as good as anything that came out in the 90s. That wasn't like huge, done by
with our 2 iPhones.
But we're probably more likely to make a critical horror podcast. Like what is that? It's weird that people are not. It's almost like people are not brave enough to make the kind of films that break the Hollywood system. And that was what was fun about the Unnamed Film Footage Festival is like, I left that thing. I was like, I want to make a movie like this,
Yeah.
Like I want to do this next year. I was like, oh, I want to cheat and copy like all these filmmakers I like, why don't you write a score and then we'll make a movie based on that score. Like we'll just figure it out. Like, I mean, and I'm sure we could probably get it as a short on their thing, maybe, hopefully, but I was completely inspired by it. But then the next thought I had was like, okay, and then what? Like going from that to the next thing is so fucking impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, similarly, I was talking to, I had a conversation earlier. Someone wants me to teach a podcasting workshop, like how to do a podcast.
Yeah, you should.
And part of the conversation was, so do you make money off of your podcast? I was like, no.
Nobody does.
There are people who do, but they prove the rule. They're so exceptional.
Yeah.
And it's side hustles for all of them.
Yeah.
Like...
with their fucking Patreon 10 cup out there all the time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or it's a way for them to make more money when they tour.
I'm so bummed out about celebrities getting into podcasting. It just bums me out, man. It's like, do we need a fucking Conan O'Brien podcast? Like, you have a fucking TV show. Like, get the fuck out of this space.
Does he? I thought he
one
was done.
One of these fucking people has a...
I'm sure they all do.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like, it's like everybody has... I mean, I get it. It's like a new format or whatever, but it was like a space for a minute for people to do something. Even Joe Rogan's show, like, was weird in its own weird thing. And like, but he's already rich. He can hire this fucking manservant to set the whole thing up for him. And yeah, I don't know. I've been salty about podcasting lately. Yeah. Like, I barely listen to podcasts at all. I'm back to audiobooks all the time.
Yeah. Although going back to you making a film,
I've
been thinking about the, I always try to think about when watching a movie, I try to think about like, okay, what genre is this? Not just horror movie, but what like ultra micro genre could this be, just as a game? And of course, what's fun about this movie is the whole spaghetti Western Iranian vampire film is beautiful. Like that is like stupid and reductive and kind of awesome because
it's exactly what it is.
Because like it's exactly what it is.
It's copywriting perfection.
Totally. But also, okay, if you were going to pitch a film like one line, never been made before, what is it?
Well, earlier I jokingly responded Ewok versus Predator.
Which is great.
I was just thinking about like, a predator stalking a band of Ewoks through Endor would be fucking hilarious.
But also, I mean, Ewoks are very cute, but they're also like
vicious
horrendously vicious and violent.
Yeah. But then that's like more Stranger Things nostalgia bullshit. So to answer your question, which is like the more artistic one, I wanted to make a punk rock stoner heist film. Like a hip hop punk rock stoner heist film. And on social media the other day, I was writing about what it would be. If you live in San Francisco and you've ever eaten at El Farolito, there's a meatsicle painting in the back, right? There's the painting of the thing that cooks the meat that the burrito meat comes from. Yeah. That painting is said to not be purchasable at any cost. Like it's priceless. It's literally priceless because the dude will not sell it to you.
Yeah.
So I had this whole idea of, what if there were like a bunch of kids, like kind of bad Mission High School kids, they were sitting around and they heard two really pretentious people sitting behind them going, this painting is priceless. Like just basically describing it how I did. And then one of them is like simultaneously taking his level 1 art history course at City College. And he's like, learns about ready-mades. And he reads that like a Campbell soup can painting from Andy Warhol is like millions of dollars. So in his brain, his stoner brain, he cooks up that this thing that looks like just a normal thing, this ready-made painting, is priceless and worth millions of dollars. And it just happens to be sitting in the burrito shop. And so then the kids come up with this like Ocean's 11 style scheme to steal it, and they get caught. And the guy who owns the place is a real fucking criminal and ends up like murdering them one by one. That's my film pitch.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, with the right social media chops, they could make money off of that if they spun the story right? Like, it's preposterous that a ready-made painting of meat at a taqueria would be worth anything.
Yeah.
But if the story you said came true, and there was like kidnapping and murder and all of that happened, that painting could actually take on weird social media cultural cachet that could translate to dark web dollars.
It does sort of happen. I mean, I have seen buttons of that painting on people's jackets, like over the years. Like, I mean, I've seen it once or twice.
I'm just saying, you know, when there have been like someone will sell like my baked potato on eBay and it goes for $40,000 or something because it just becomes a meme.
Yeah.
That painting could discover value through some weird, like, oh, it's the painting that people died over stealing it as a joke.
Yeah.
As a stoner
and
prank.
It already does have value. It has regional value. You know, it is like, anyone who's eaten there who listens to this podcast knows exactly what the fuck we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's funny, this whole conversation comes off of, or this whole idea comes off of a thread. The guy Brian Connect.
Yeah.
I think he was talking about how he wanted to write about like taqueria art. And I was like, oh, this is the thing I want, you know. What about you? Like, what's your one-line movie?
I don't know. You know, I had that question and I just couldn't think of anything very clever. You're just better at this sort of thing than I am.
Homoerotic tennis murders?
Thank you. Great.
Yeah.
Done.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know anything about tennis, though.
I don't.
In fact, I think I didn't read Infinite Jest the first time I picked it up because I was like, oh shit, this is about tennis. Fuck this. And I put it down.
It's really off-putting. Like it is only after having read Musashi that I had tolerance for it, because like there's a whole thing like, you know, Miyamoto Musashi, the sword fighter. He was like, once you see the excellence, you know it in all things. Like once you see the way, you see it in all things. It's like, okay, maybe that's what's being demonstrated in all this tennis talk. And then it's fucking hard to get through, man. Like I'm kind of sold on David Foster Wallace now.
Yeah.
But I think almost no one should read that book.
That's fair.
Yeah.
What else about this movie?
I mean, yeah, I hope that she keeps making cool movies.
Me too.
I hope that like her movies are singular, and even though you didn't like The Bad Batch, I thought it was great.
Well, her next movie, I'm forgetting what it is. It's got a very high-end, legit, very Hollywood cast, and I'm forgetting what it is, but it looks promising. Probably come out later this year. But the one after that that's in, according to IMDb, pre-production, is a remake of the film Cliffhanger, starring Jason Momoa, which is, I would not be surprised if that was a prank that she and Jason Momoa put upon IMDb to see how long they could have that sitting there with both their credits on it. However, we are living in a world where Fantasy Island is a slasher movie in the theaters, and, you know, like all bets are off with remakes at this point.
Bad.
For Fantasy Island?
Yeah.
Oh, I totally want to see it. It's probably terrible, but whatever, I'll see it.
Well, imagine if there's like this space for people to do action movies in the way that Blumhouse has opened this space for horror movies. You know, like okay, we're going to take action movies as seriously as these dorks over at A24 take horror movies, and you end up with this sort of, you know, nostalgic yet also innovative action movies. Like, you know, like another type of, like, could you imagine somebody just making a cool buddy cop movie like that? Like somebody really, really talented.
Especially if one of the buddies was a dog.
Huh. Like Turner and Hooch.
That's the buddy cop dog movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like she seems to really like Jason Momoa. Like they get along really well, and they were talking about creating their own Dogma 95 rules, where it's like there had to be a skateboard, somebody had to get a blowjob. You know, there was like a couple of them. Like
I hate this kind of language, but that's fucking hipster nonsense.
It's kind of funny. Like there are definitely like more like class war times in my life when I would have been totally against hipster nonsense. But lately I've been like kind of leaning into like the pretentiousness lately, because I was like, you know what? I read a fucking ton of tough books. Why shouldn't I have like these fucking effete tastes and all these other things?
Oh, I don't want to critique hipsters. I'm just critiquing hipster nonsense.
Yeah.
I'm all in for coffee culture, but to a point.
Yeah. Man, speaking of that picture of Elijah Wood riding the scooter is like the hips. Have you not seen that meme? It's a meme of Elijah Wood like riding like one of those bird scooters, and he's wearing like the cuffed selvage jeans, the Hawaiian shirt, the jean jacket that looks like it's probably vintage, and he looks like the most hipstery guy. And so one of the memes is like he looks like he's on his way to a coffee shop called Thorn and Branch to buy some leather goods afterwards. Like it was just like it's so perfect. But that guy is like really pretty legit in filmmaking. I mean, he produced.
Oh, he's tied to really cool shit. Yeah, he co-produced. This movie.
Spectrovision is his company.
Yeah, they did Mandy and Color Out of Space, and he's putting his name behind some really interesting projects.
It's interesting. I watched that movie Maniac that he's in, and I didn't like it at all. Like, I found it like an unpleasant movie to watch.
Was it a Spectrovision movie as well?
It's not,
okay.
Or at least to my knowledge, it's not. But it's, he's in it, and I can't not see him as Frodo. But it's interesting, like how somebody's take on something can kind of influence how you see it. Like, I walked out of that theater and was like, "Fuck this stupid movie," and I was talking to Madeline, one of the people who did the unnamed footage, and she's like, well, this actually, to me, it's like commenting on like the POV of pornography. And I was like, oh, and it completely like changed my perspective on, So that's the kind of thing I'm sort of more interested in lately. I was even thinking about the criticisms of this movie or A Girl Walks Home Alone are often that, actually a weird connection there. Like this woman I was talking to, she writes for Macaulay Culkin's, or she used to write for Bunny Ears, which is Macaulay Culkin's thing. And I would realize Home Alone is in the title of this movie. I don't know. There's some sort of like crazy mystical shit there.
No, it's just stoner.
Yeah. Well, that's what it is. Putting
connections together.
Yeah. I don't know. I completely lost that thread. I have completely stopped smoking pot for a while too.
It's going to be years until you start making sense.
Oh, dude, it's. I mean, I don't think I could do my current job smoking as much pot as I used to. Like, I just am not motivated enough. But I've definitely crossed some wires. I realized after this weekend, I really need to boost up my horror watching.
Well, if you boost up your horror, you're going to be reading a lot less, and that's.
I know that's a bummer.
But after a certain point, why keep reading?
I mean, there's like, I own hundreds of books I haven't read.
Yeah.
Like, I need to get through them.
Well, it makes two of us. It's just that you actually read them. I just collect them.
Yeah. I don't know. You can make time to read, get through them.
Oh, clearly.
I mean, like not watching TV. Like that, people are always like, oh my God, you must be a speed reader. Like, no, I'm not like I'm not exactly a fast reader. I just make time for it by not watching television.
Yeah. I read first thing. That's the only time I can really.
Oh, in the morning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wake up and I read.
Oh, that's good.
But I also have the luxury of not having a job that starts before 5 p.m.
Yeah, also,
usually.
You don't have pets, which is fucking key, dude. Like the first half
Nobody
hour of my day.
Nobody should have pets, Chad. Nobody should have pets.
I completely agree.
They're not familiars. They're not service animals. They're
useless.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like we
domesticated them against our better nature.
Yeah. The books that I've probably not written or films I have not thought about making because of the amount of time and effort I put into dealing with fucking dogs, which I don't even want, is pretty shocking. I was like just adding up the time I spent today dealing with these fucking dogs. It's like an hour and a half. I'm just fucking around with them, trying to get them to do not shit on the floor. It's like, I hate it. Don't get dogs.
No. I kind of want a dog. Ugh. So badly. If I had land, I would have a golden retriever the next day.
Yeah, I guess.
So anyway, got anything else on this movie?
I don't know. Let me look at my notes here and see if there's anything funny that I missed. Yeah, I guess something that she said I thought was kind of interesting is it's an idea that's out there. It's not originally hers, but she said like, film is a mirror for yourself and you're going to see certain things in it. And it really made me start thinking about, kind of what we do, which is like this film criticism type of thing and how there's definitely a sort of like an autobiographical element of it. Like you could listen to what we think about these films and probably get an idea, especially if you listen to a lot of episodes, about kind of how we are. Like I feel like I am on the show a lot like how I am in real life. I feel like you get the same person.
Yeah. You're not who you are on social media and text.
What do you mean?
I find that the chasm between who you are in messaging and who you are in person is the widest chasm of anybody I know.
But you know what it is? I hate texting. I think it sucks. And
I know, but you take it out on me.
I know. This is how my wife gave me this. So your problem and my wife's problem with my text is that I use punctuation. And I get paid money to edit things to be grammatically correct.
Yeah.
And I can't not.
But it's not actually that. If I'll mention something, I'll mention a writer via message, and you will say something nasty and spiteful and hateful that if we were in person, you'd be like, snark, and then explain yourself. But you just snark.
I thought about that last time. You would send me some, you're so man, check out this book. And I was like, this isn't not to my liking, so I'll just shit on it right here.
Yes.
And usually in face to face, you get a ha ha ha
Yeah.
with it that can sort of like soften.
But
it
instead,
up.
I just get proper punctuation, and it makes me sad.
Yeah, you're not the first. Many people who I text with have, like, I'll run into people who later are like, "Are you mad at me?"
Yeah.
I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And
No, I just read Drunk and White.
yeah, like I'm just like stuck in the 1930s with my grammar. Yeah, it's weird, man. Like that whole like just abandoning punctuation. I didn't agree to it. You know, I'm sorry that like grammar is harsh. You know, fuck.
Okay, so what have we learned?
I've learned that I need to go see movies when they come out, man. Like, I mean, usually I have some sort of fucking stupid thing to say at this point, but like, I would say what I've learned from watching this movie is that it's better to catch a movie in the moment, man. Like, I feel like I'm like behind the years and really dismissive of stuff like needing to see it when it comes out. And I think that there's energy in seeing things when they come out that is worth it. And I also
like Midsummer.
I'm probably just not going to watch that.
See, but
I know what you're saying. Like people ask about it all the time, and I have this like
for the same reason people said, "Have you seen Girl Walks Home Alone at Night?"
But then again,
because it's worth seeing.
But then last week I saw The Lodge in the theater, by myself, and I thought to myself, I would have rather have just not seen this.
Midsummer is not that movie.
Yeah. Another thing about films is like when I watch movies at home, my wife or my dogs or something is always interrupting watching the film. Like there's always something like pulling my attention away from it.
That sounds horrible.
It's fucking awful. And then when you go into a theater, like you can't pause it and go look something up, and then all of a sudden you're on Amazon looking up omnibus editions of DC books you don't have. You know, it's like to sit down.
Is there a cool media room at your work?
No.
How not San Francisco of your workplace?
Yeah, I don't know. Now that I'm making good money, I've actually considered getting not just my seat, but the two seats next to me in theaters and just buying them and be like, it's going to be worth $45 to go see this movie by myself without somebody with me.
Yeah. Although the one movie that I'm glad I saw in the theater was A Quiet Place, and it's interesting that it has a sequel coming up pretty soon, and it's not that great a movie, actually. Upon reflection, it starts to become quite stupid. Mm-hmm. But the experience of watching that movie in a theater is interesting because you're simultaneously watching a movie and listening to a room full of people struggle to be quiet along with the protagonists.
Yeah.
So it becomes almost like this performance that the audience is involved in. Mm-hmm. That was cool.
Yeah. Oh, I just thought of another movie.
Yeah.
Pronoun forward action films. They, them, live. It's like, you know. Well, what have you learned? What have you learned from watching this movie?
God, I just wish there were more movies like this.
Yeah, right? It's like...
Fuck.
But then I realized that with this film festival, there probably are a lot of them. It just takes work to get to see them.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's funny. Sometimes people send me these lists they found online of like 10 best horror movies this year, and most of them have only played at like 2 film festivals.
Yeah.
And that the author of the list saw, and they may or may not ever be available, even on streaming. You know? It's baffling.
Yeah, I mean, there were things at this film fest that you're just not going to see, or you can go send the person $45 for a DVD. And I get it, like you got to recoup your costs, but fucking indie filmmakers price like fucking academic texts. It's like, I know that only 50 people are buying this, but it doesn't mean it should be $60.
Yeah.
You know,
for sure.
It should at least come with a pen or something. Yeah.
Are we done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay. Sign up for our mailing list at scarythoughts.org. Email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org. And email us. It's fucking great. And if you feel like dropping us a review, it's been a while. We just got one the other day. It kind of made me feel warm. Thanks, kids.
And happy. And listen to the Overlooked Theater and our buddies Popcorn, Piss, and Vinegar. Like, say no to corporate podcasts.
Damn straight. Love you guys. Thanks for listening.
I don't love you.